Hey everybody, welcome, and it is my pleasure to welcome Allyssa Victory to the program. Allyssa, how are you doing?
I'm great. Happy holidays. How are you? Happy afternoon.
I'm better for having you here. And Alyssa's running for mayor of Oakland, and Allyssa, you are staff attorney with the ACLU, to which I say, yeah. And hey, talk about, first of all, your job with the ACLU, and then, what sparked you to decide to run for mayor?
Well, again, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me on the show and for just having this platform to raise issues about news going on in Oakland. I'm Allyssa Victory. I'm running in the 2022 general election. I'm running to be the first Black woman ever elected mayor of the city, and I'm running because I'm a product of this community. I grew up here in North Oakland. I've lived in every district and even overcome homelessness on my journey. And part of that journey includes becoming a civil rights attorney, as you mentioned. I currently practice with the ACLU of Northern California. Our general mission is to protect, preserve, and expand our civil rights and civil liberties. And I work specifically in criminal justice and policing and advise cities, counties, as well as community groups and advocacy groups on use of force policy, on policy change and reform, on budgetary decisions, and even police labor rights. And our office of ACLU serves the entire Northern California region, which is around 48 counties out of the 58 in the state of California. So I've been doing that work for a few years now and have been a dedicated civil rights leader and champion even before serving with ACLU. That's a bit of kind of what the work is that I'm doing right now. I've even served and advised the city of Oakland, including our use of force policy revision with the Police Commission's ad hoc committee, and advised our Reimagined Public Safety Task Force on issues around Measure Z, which is our minimum police staffing measure, and around police labor rights. So I have a strong passion for municipal law that I've kind of bridged into my civil rights work, where I'm able to partner, to advise, or work with groups that are trying to lobby to get certain legislation or certain commitments in policy from their elected officials.
What was the aha moment where you said, I'm going to run for mayor?
For me, the aha moment was finishing my undergraduate degree, an honors degree in ethnic studies and Black studies, and had been doing a lot of organizing and infrastructure building on my campus with the student leadership there, but also wanting to take that leadership and those resources back to my home, back to Oakland. So I did come back to Oakland as soon as I left UC San Diego, and I went to law school at UC Hastings across the water in San Francisco. And I actually concentrated and focused my law degree in government law because I knew back then in 2012, 2013 that I wanted to govern. I wanted to specifically work in local government. I, again, am a product of this city and have witnessed, decades of issues proliferating, even worsening over my lifetime, and don't want that same trajectory to continue. I know that the status quo is not working for everyone, especially for people that look like me, for young professionals, and for students, for working class people in the city. So I want to be that representation, that leadership. I can have the experience coming from this community, but also have some of the hard skills being a civil rights attorney and having a focus in government law.
What is the problem that, if you were to win, you would tackle first?
There's so many issues that are important to me, and it's hard to say which one I'll tackle first because the mayor really is an all-encompassing role that needs to have the energy and the capacity to address multiple issues, multiple crises at once. But one issue that is one of my priorities that's really close to my heart is housing and homelessness. And I've overcome homelessness with my family. I became homeless when I was finishing high school. We were evicted from our home. My mother was working multiple jobs at that time. So despite working as a teacher, she was not making enough to be able to afford our bills and our mortgage. And so we were evicted during the housing crisis where many Black families lost their homes. Sorry, did I catch you off?
Yeah, this happened in Oakland.
Yes, this happened in North Oakland, the home that I grew up in. And
so that breaks my heart. What happened?
Again, we bought our first home in North Oakland, Bushrod Park area on 58th and Shattuck. I grew up there, spent my childhood there, was in middle school there. I started serving with my church in West Oakland while we were living in that home. We lived a few blocks over from my grandmother, who stayed on 63rd at the time. I was going to school, and again, towards the end of high school, around my senior year, we became evicted, lost our home to foreclosure, became housing unstable. We lived with family members, then we lived with friends from church. We got an apartment in El Cerrito for some months, then we're evicted, and then we lived nowhere. We lived in cars, lived on floors, had to split up from my mom and my sister. And this continued while I was in college. Anytime I would come home for holidays and on breaks, would stay with friends, with anyone that had a space for me to stay for a few weeks. Would try to get jobs. So I worked at Fairyland for a period of time. I worked at Laney College Bookstore as a cashier, working any jobs I could as a young student coming home to help my family and support myself as a first-generation college student. And that housing insecurity and stability continued for years, right? After I graduated high school and was trying to continue my education. And that's what motivated me to work throughout all of my undergrad as well as my law school years. And what really also inspired me to come home so that I could be rooted with my family, help provide them with some stability and security. And my mother did not get permanent housing, stable housing of her own until December last year. So almost a decade.
I have to explain something. As a 59-year-older, I grew up with my single mom in Oakland, and we were never close to that. And what bothers me about what's happening today is it doesn't matter if it's you or Oakland Raiders running back Josh Jacobs, now Las Vegas, who was homeless, or the increasing number of athletes I've interviewed in the NFL draft who are homeless in college. What bothers me to the point of tears is that this is too common. So I wanted to just explain that because it's horrifying that we allow this to happen in our society. Go ahead, please.
Absolutely. And that was my own personal housing crisis, my family's housing crisis over a decade ago in this city. We, took us years to get back stable, to get back on our feet, to be able to reunite and even spend the holidays together. And that was not without really any city assistance or guidance in that process. Right? Again, we're sleeping on floors, we're sleeping in hotels, trying to use whatever money we could to have just shelter so that I could finish school, so that my mom could go to work, so we could have somewhere to eat together. And right now we're in an even worse housing crisis. That ever since 2018, our city has declared every quarter that we're in a local emergency due to homelessness. And that was 3 years ago that we started making those declarations of an emergency. We haven't seen a lot of emergency actions, to the point that the city estimates that 70% of the people that are unhoused, that are sleeping in cars, RVs, on the sidewalks and in tents are Black. They look just like me. They look like you. That's not by accident. It's by design. Right? During the housing foreclosure crisis, that was one of the largest captures of Black wealth, of Black home ownership that hurt so many people in our community. So many families were displaced, and that caused people to then still have to travel for hours to get to their jobs here in Oakland, because they don't stop going to school, they don't stop working. But that housing instability and security becomes a regional crisis as well. And we're seeing it happen in a lot of other cities that are not building affordable housing, that's not controlling the rent prices, and that's not ensuring that there is workforce housing, student housing, housing that's affordable to all spectrums of the income that we know our residents have. There's no attempts to increase our minimum wages to ensure that people's wages actually match the pricing of their housing. So there's policy choices and decisions that have been made over decades that are causing this crisis. We've declared it an emergency, but we're not seeing a lot of emergency actions to house people. We're seeing encampment policies to maintain encampments. We're seeing criminalization of homelessness. Everything's a crime. When you live outside, going to the bathroom, taking a shower, trying to cook your food on a fire, all those things become illegal and become a crime. But the solution that I want to push, that I champion, that is really close to my heart, is making sure we have housing first policies. That all other interventions, including Drug rehabilitation, mental health support is less effective when you are unhoused and you are. I'm in an active neighborhood. If you can hear the cars behind me. But all of those things, all those interventions, all those supports and resources are less effective if people are still going home to the sidewalk, to the streets, to a tent, especially while we're in a rainstorm season right now. It's extremely cold outside and we're in a global pandemic, right? So housing people will help stabilize our health crisis, will help stabilize our public safety crisis, and they're all interconnected. So housing is one of my main priorities and one of the first things that I want to begin to tackle once I'm elected.
I'm going to ask the same question I asked Greg Hodge. What is your assessment of the current mayor and how she's handled the homeless situation?
I've been definitely disappointed, to say the least. Again, we're in a crisis situation, and it's been a crisis for Black and working class folks for a while, for decades, even preceding our current mayor's term. But our mayor stepped into that and has inherited and even built a worse situation that I'll be inheriting. So yes, I'm extremely disappointed, and there's more that can be done and that should have been done. Oakland is a strong mayor city, which is very unique compared to the other cities in our region. Oakland has a strong mayor that is separate from our city council, and our mayor controls all of our city departments and services through the city administrator. So the type of public services we have, whether that be homeless administration services, cleaning, public works, our streets and trash, all of those things are really determined in terms of their execution implementation by the mayor and city administration. They're the executive branch of our government. But once our council makes those emergency declarations, it gives the mayor and city administrator emergency powers. Some of those things include really drastic and emergency changes like taking over hotels, abandoned properties, of course, paying their fair share and worth, but making sure that we immediately open adequate housing that is fit for human beings to shelter them when we are declaring emergency conditions, when we're declaring a crisis. The response needs to match that, and I have not seen it.
Is there an inspirational figure that you follow in running for mayor?
Wow. It's hard to say just one figure that inspires me. Definitely my mother has inspired and sparked my public service journey. She had me serving almost every weekend doing food and clothing distribution from our church in West Oakland. I didn't make that choice as a middle school child to want to do that early morning every weekend, but I had to, and I started to love it. And I started to see that there was a need, and there were always people that were lined up waiting for us to open, to get clothes, to get food. When we would even have health days and health fairs and provide free health services. So again, our churches and communities have been trying to fill the gaps that our government and our city is not meeting. And I've understood that from a young age.
By the way, what's your church?
Service. True Vine Baptist Church in West Oakland is my home church, the first church I joined as a child with my family and where I grew up. And my mother has been a teacher. She's a preschool teacher, so she's also my first educator, my first teacher personally. And a lot of how I'm running my campaign is around education, even civic engagement, empowering people to know how to vote, to understand the strong mayor system and how important and critical this election is. My platform is really running on truth, on knowledge, on education, because that empowers our people, and our people are the ones that I'll be accountable to at the end of the day.
I have, and I talked to you about this off camera, here goes. I have an idea that the person of the year in Oakland is the smash and grab robber. What do you think?
Well, it's certainly gotten a lot of attention, especially during these last few months or so. It's been the top headline for so many publications and so many of our public safety discussions. Our public safety is in crisis. I would never deny that. There are a lot of thefts going on, from commercial and retail businesses to also individuals, people at their homes, people walking down the street, people's cars. And we're also in a homicide crisis. We're reporting close to 140 homicides this year. which is one of the deadliest years that we've ever had in Oakland. So we are in crisis, and again, it's connected. Our public safety crisis is connected to all of the other indicators of a healthy public, a healthy society, of our healthcare, of our housing, our jobs, and economic development, even our city infrastructure. All those things are contributing to the safety of our community, all the traffic collisions and deaths that we've reported recently, including of elected officials. So there is a crisis, and it is everywhere. It's not just these robberies. It's not just the one-off situations that the news is reporting, but the entire system is broken. It is failing to keep people safe, to make people trust even our public safety departments and responses. That people feel very frustrated in this city particularly. And again, this is not just unique to Oakland, this is everywhere. My job is working in criminal justice and police practices, and these conversations have been going on for years. So one, this is not anything new, and this is connected to the other crises that we're experiencing as a city, as a state, and as a country. I still remind people that the largest theft that's happening in our state at any time is wage theft. And that is connected to people who are individually robbing their neighbors and other people's cars or going into wealthier neighborhoods. People are lacking. They're in need of things. They're not necessarily stealing just to become rich. They're stealing because they're poor, because they don't have enough, because people are losing jobs, and we've had all-time high unemployment during the pandemic, because pandemic benefits have been ending, because eviction moratoriums have been ending, right? So we're creating crises on top of crises, and it looks like people are in crisis, which means our public safety is in crisis. So we have to invest more in people overall to help prevent some of the crises that we're seeing. I want to invest in jobs and economic development, and even expand and make permanent programs like our guaranteed basic income that we've been piloting in the last few months in the city of Oakland, and there have been pilots in other cities in the Bay Area. And so those types of people-serving solutions will help to set us up for a healthier community. It's going to take time. It's going to take multiple approaches. And yes, it's going to continue to be a part of our discussion. But I still want to lead with truth and with facts, and to remind us of how it's connected to our other crises, that we can't just have tunnel vision and focus on one type of solution or on one symptom of the problem.
I had Oakland Councilman Lauren Taylor, who actually is your competitor, running for mayor as well, and he floated one of several proposals for initiatives to reduce crime, but they all point to putting more cops on the street. What do you think about their proposals, and what would you do to reduce gun violence?
I think one, I would like to see the same type of urgency and energy addressed to other types of solutions and interventions like our homelessness and our jobs crises. But in terms of simply adding more numbers is not public safety, right? It's the quality of people. It's if they come from our communities, if they even understand our system of policing and the reforms, many of the reforms that we have already in motion. We're under an 18-year-old settlement agreement that is an extra layer of people's performance if they're going to join our police department. We also have multiple other settlements involving our police department recently, including use of chemical weapons, as well as public records access records. That will be, I think, a 15-month settlement that we're looking at for our police department to comply with public records access. So simply adding more officers doesn't get to the core of the problem of what are officers doing, what's the quality of officers, and how do we get out of some of our department's own illegal conduct or non-compliance with our settlement agreements and our legal mandates. And none of that is addressed by simply adding more people. That people want a response, but we also know that officers are doing non-criminal response. Officers are responding to homelessness. They're responding to private businesses. They're responding to traffic and to sideshows. And many residents report that their response is, taking down license plates or really observing and monitoring. Again, we have to prioritize. If we're in a crisis of homicides, of thefts, or break and entering, then we need to prioritize people's scheduling and deployment to those areas where the crime is happening, and to make sure that they're able to respond to those violent emergency situations, not to things where you can have civilians do it, not to things where other types of public servants would be better served and trained to do them. We have to prioritize the skills and the special training for our police department to the types of public safety issues we're dealing with in our city. And our city, through our negotiated MOU agreement, which is a labor contract with the police unions, already has authority as the employer to set people's schedules, to determine the mission of the police department and its entire organization. So we already have the tools. There's the lack of political will, right? And part of it is, police are always going to ask for more money and resources and officers, even if that eats 100% of our city budget. And so there has to be some leaders, including myself, that are willing to talk about what is already on the table and how to use it most effectively before we talk about expansion. And all of the proposals that I've seen don't even promise these new officers on the ground until 2023. So again, it's not a response to me to the emergencies, to the crises, to what people are asking for right now. And it is going to be hard to make some of those shifts, but there are things we can do immediate. And I'll just give one other example that our council has already legislated, removing our police department from handling special events permitting, right? If I want to have a special event in the park, if I want to put up some barricades and block off the street because I want to have, some food trucks, then I have to ask the city for a special permit to do that. It's an administrative duty to go through the permits. Not every single special event requires police presence or police to be involved at all in issuing a permit. But we've set it up that way, and those are choices. But we can choose, and our council already has acted, to have that be a part of the administration's duty and taken away from our police. It's not been implemented, and it's been over a year. So there's a lack of political will to make some of these common sense changes and to reorient, reassign our police to responding to crises that are in our streets, right? Have faster response times, have a higher solve rate of the violent crimes that we're experiencing. So right now it's around 17%, our crime solve rate. So I believe that before we talk about increasing, let's make sure that we're effectively, efficiently using the funds, the officers, the staff and personnel that we have in that department, and that we're using all of our other departments effectively as well if they can be part of this response, whether it's taking over the traffic duties, taking over homeless administration, taking over special events. So I don't agree that any of the proposals we've seen recently from council members are any immediate resolution. And again, from working in police practices regional wide, simply adding more officers, increasing the number of officers did not increase public safety. The safest communities are those with the most resources, with the most access to opportunity, not simply those with the most militarization and surveillance.
Hey, I want to also know what you think about just empowering citizens to become more vigilante. I make that term because essentially that's what it would be. And the reason why I say that is that I've noticed, and it's not the first time I've said this, that on Nextdoor, these crimes are of what I call a granular nature. Somebody robbing your mailbox, somebody trying to get into your place in your apartment, someone walking the neighborhood who's homeless, but also has, for other reasons, some really bad intentions, or they're just frustrated or whatever. But the bottom line is, it's not where the police are just right there, I mean, what do you think about that? About that as a solution or tool?
I wouldn't call it vigilanteism, but more kind of community safety model where people are invested in their own safety to the point that they may learn some tools or have a block communication, right? Block parties and things used to be community safety of everybody just knowing each other, knowing each other's names, knowing so-and-so's parents, or this is this kid's address if they're acting out, or if I see them past their curfew, that there was a more sense of collectivity and there was more just recognition among our neighbors so that people could engage in more real, genuine community policing, not community policing by the cops and sworn public servants, but community policing literally by the community, right? That we've seen other groups and nonprofits and collectives of folks that are running alternative crisis response to the police. that have their own private numbers you can call, that have trainings of how to administer things like first aid, right? That maybe you can't wait for an ambulance or for an officer to come if somebody needs medical attention. So I absolutely agree with empowering our residents, our workers, our youth to have their own tools for de-escalation, their own tools for self-defense, but to not, rely solely on that. But yes, police still are a response. Usually you are calling them when there is a crime in progress or there's already something that's happened to you. And so again, part of prevention is absolutely empowering and training and educating our residents and communities on how better to protect themselves, not just how to dial 911.
Now, and right on cue, here's Derek Sue says, community guards with CCWs, not police. I believe that's his way of agreeing with you. And so you've been officially baptized now as a candidate. So what do you think about it?
Thanks for your comment, Derek.
What do you think about what he's saying there? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, we've seen, community patrols. We've seen them in Chinatown. We've seen, again, private groups like Community Ready Corps that are community trained individuals that people may hire for community events, for block parties, but they also do giveaways and they do educational events. And again, there's a lot of self-defense trainings, but also de-escalation, conflict resolution, restorative justice, which had been a really strong program that was being implemented in our school districts. But again, teaching not just our youth, but even our adults, right? Even our seniors around those types of practices. Because we've also are seeing that some of these homicides are neighbors killing each other, right? These are interpersonal conflicts. These are neighborhood to neighborhood, or literally I have a fight with my neighbor and it escalates to somebody getting a weapon and using that to harm someone or to kill someone. So I absolutely agree with, trusting our community to know ourselves, trusting us a bit more to have tools at the ready that may come faster and be more handy than having to call the cops and just wait. Because as we know, there are inequity in response times, and there's still a lot of violent crime that is happening right now. And if police themselves are saying they can't cover all of it, they don't have capacity, they've even done press conferences saying, community, help us, right? So we're all actually saying the same thing, that public safety requires all of us. It is the public, right? It is our friends, it's our family, it's our neighbors who are committing crimes, but who are also the victims of crime. So it does require all of us, not everyone putting our entire responsibility into one department of our city.
So it sounds like, though, we have kind of decoupled from the idea of either refund or defund the police, and now it seems like everyone's in agreement that we need the police, but we need to go beyond that, right?
Not sure what the question is. Definitely conversations have shifted. I see that there's a backlash to the defund language. Now it seems that the police are using defund more, even though technically in numbers, our police department was not defunded.
Right.
That they actually got an increase from their last cycle of our budget, and again have gotten more increases with other legislation and resolutions adopted since the July budget that have expanded their training resources, their equipment, as well as their staffing and their academies. So again, there's a lot of kind of misinformation and various uses, I would say, of those terminology. I use whatever term meets people where they're at, right? Again, we're talking about public safety. It's more than just one department. It's more than just one line item in our budget. It's really our entire budget needs to prioritize the public. If our people are safe, if they're housed, if they have jobs, if they're healed, have access to healthcare, if they have even violence prevention training and de-escalation, restorative justice, then we'll see crime go down. We'll see people have a better and holistic response to crime than putting someone in a cage. So there are a lot of problems, again, with our police department, but with policing as a structure overall, and with our carceral system. Whatever language people use to talk about that or talk about the solutions, I will meet them where they're at. Again, yes, I'm saying right now we're in a public safety crisis. We have a police department that has a plethora of resources and one of the largest, if not the largest, staffing of all our city departments. We have to use them to ensure that our public dollars are going towards the public resources that we need. So that's the department we have. I'm committed to working with our chief and with our officers to ensure they're responding, to ensure they're prioritizing, and that they're serving equitably and reducing all of the illegal misconduct and violations of our settlement agreements that has been going on for several years.
Shifting gears to economic development, Howard Terminal. What say you about Howard Terminal?
Howard Terminal, I was a part of the city-sponsored community benefits process on the Jobs and Economic Development Subcommittee for, I think, maybe 9 months, where we developed the robust matrix of community benefits asks. Unfortunately, we have not received a very positive response from the Fisher family, the owner of the A's, to the community benefits ask. And those things include things like living wages, like local hire, like ensuring people have a right to unionize if they're employed at this job site. I am a labor attorney as well as a civil rights attorney, so workers' rights and protections are always paramount to me. And again, I have been committed to working with this project to developing a robust community voice around how we would partner with the A's if they were to bring Howard Terminal to fruition. I know there's a lot of steps in the process. Many of them are not in control of the mayor. So I have been very active in participating and reviewing the environmental impact report and providing comments on it, and attending community town halls by the A's themselves, but also by community groups that are trying to provide information or do surveying of people's, what people's concerns are, what people's issues are. I don't live in West Oakland. I live in District 4 by Mills. So I also want to respect what people who live in that immediate area are feeling, are seeing, are thinking, as well as our port workers. So again, I've been committed to working on a community benefits ask to make sure that our community is actually served, that our city will be benefited if or when this project goes forward. My understanding is there's still many other steps that have to be approved, that have to go through city council, that have to go through the Board of Commissioners that is separate from the mayor's seat. And, but also, aside from what happens with Howard Terminal, the A's are also going to be a partner in developing the Coliseum site. They have a current lease there until 2024 and are in agreement to purchase the county's portion. And Oakland has already awarded exclusive negotiation rights or exclusive negotiation agreement to the African American Sports Entertainment Group that has a robust proposal to bring a WNBA team there, to bring retail, housing, and they've announced they want to bring over 30,000 jobs and prioritize East Oakland and those who have been locked out of these opportunities, especially since the Coliseum is located in East Oakland. So I support economic development and development of infrastructure, of tourist attractions, especially in our tourist district, which is actually by the current Coliseum site. And in terms of Howard Terminal, I don't have the sole say as mayor in what happens or how it moves forward or the approvals that are left, but am committed to educating people and to continuing to work with the A's for a strong benefits package to ensure that our city and the people are able to own their communities and to have a say in what happens.
What do we do? And I want to just on this, because my concern about Howard Terminal is different. When I look at it, I see, for example, you're on the community group, right? And there was supposed to be a price tag attached to what the community was asking for. And yet I didn't see that dollar amount from the city. My concern is that the city staff doesn't know what it's doing in terms of implementing Howard Terminal. And so, for example, do you know how much money Howard Terminal is supposed to be produced in terms of tax increment financing?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't want to.
Right. And so a lot of people don't. Not even the staff does. I mean, I can tell you, as the person who talked Dave Cavall into using tax increment financing out of the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District legislature back in 2017, the intent I had was to have it used for affordable housing, because I told him, I said, you're not going to be able to get anything done unless you have affordable housing, spoken for. Okay. That's where all that came from. And he'll acknowledge that. My concern is that the city did not do the process of immediately contacting the county in 2019 and a lot of other steps that I don't want to outline out of respect for the fact that this is your time and not mine, right? But Lisa, we really screwed this thing up. And what makes me cry a lot of the time is that we have a generation of people that don't know how we're supposed to do this. Not you supposedly, but I mean the professionals, you know? And that's why I have a feeling that this is just sort of going to be there. I don't know how it's going to change if you're the mayor, which is my next question. How do you want it to change? Because if you're the mayor, you're going to be in the driver's seat. We're not going to change to a weak mayor or a council manager for a government, right? It'll still be a strong mayor, unless you want something different. Right? But I'm really concerned.
We'd have to have a charter change with the public elections on that.
I live that one. And my concern is that we don't know what we're doing as a city. How do you comfort and we can make our government competent again?
You can start by electing me to mayor. But yeah, I think again, as I've reiterated, a lot of our issues are not about a lack of money or lack of public space, lack of options. It's really a lack of political will. And I think we get ourselves even into a lot of illegal situations that require a lot of litigation or lawsuits to tell us these things can't be done. These things shouldn't have been passed as policy or into law. And I do think that there needs to be a lot more accountability, even within all of the electeds together, to ensure that we're implementing legislation when council passes it. As I mentioned, our mayor has held things up that council passed for years. That's unacceptable. Our council is the legislative body, but if there's no respect coming from the mayor's side or transparency in how we're actually implementing things, it's hard for council to do their job, and there's a lack of trust. And if we don't trust each other, we're not working well within the city, we're not respecting each other's roles and allowing us to function fully, then yes, the public is going to lose a lot of trust. The public is going to lose interest and not want to just listen to hours-long debates and fights among their elected officials. Right, so we lose civic engagement and participation when we have a government that's really just caught up in its own bureaucracy or its own personal kind of relationships or personal beefs. So I'm coming from outside of that, right? I've not been elected in our city before. I am elected to the Democratic Party for our assembly district, but that was a slightly different ballot than our city election. But I'm coming to bring kind of a change from all of the noise, from the status quo, from people wanting to work incrementally within a system or a framework that's already broken. So yes, I want to again start from the framework of the people always. That is what the mayor seat represents as a whole. We didn't have a mayor when the city was founded. It was just the council manager. The mayor seat was created to represent all people in the city. So having a mayor that's going to strongly champion our community benefits agreements on all development projects is really important to me and is a role that I will play and that I've already been playing as an advocate and as a resident. In our, talking about even the financing districts, I think our mayor can do more to provide those public town halls, those public education, and to champion again what the community is then laid out after 9 months of work that the city sponsored. And I'm not hearing our mayor really align with the community benefits proposals and to really push and ask for those things. I know there have been some really shocking comments around not building any affordable housing and having it 100% luxury. Again, we have to talk around if that's the proposal we're receiving. What are we going to do as elected officials? What am I willing to do as a mayor to ensure that this project on public land is going to benefit the public of the city, especially if there's any public dollars that are going to end up going into this construction or maintenance, right? Even if it's from a financing district, those are monies that are being diverted now into this district and away from our city. So I'm always going to take the position of representing the people and trying to always have a question, an assessment period of what is best for the people of Oakland.
Hey, on that, I want to ask you also something that we've talked about before in general, and that is that, where are we in terms of recovering from the pandemic, in your view?
I think we're coming out of this pandemic with more inequity than we went into it. I think it was very divine timing that our city underwent its equity indicators assessment and report in 2018 that already showed massive disparities, mostly along racial lines and also along geographic lines in terms of districts that were more impacted by things like unhealthy climates, toxic pollution, even by traffic deaths and pedestrian safety. And those all mostly fell on Black and Brown communities in the city. And we then established a Department of Race and Equity. And that department has been underfunded and understaffed, but we're supposed to be approaching every issue, traffic, street paving, homelessness, healthcare, from the lens of addressing the equities that we've already identified and mapped out in that 2018 report. We've not been seeing it done. So we're going to come out of this pandemic with the current trajectory, with more inequity among our city, among our residents, along racial lines and geographic income lines. And that is by design, right? Because there's a design that created the inequity, and there's a design that can repair it and that can undo some of that harm. But I think that with not leading from this point of equity, we're going to see that Oakland is now one of the most expensive places to purchase a home in. That property values are actually increasing while people's properties are being broken into, are being damaged, while we're having a lot of fires from RVs and encampments and destroying properties as well. But property values are going up. It's becoming more expensive to live here, to buy here, to even have gas, to travel anywhere by car here, right? So there's some people that means it's benefiting. There are people that are getting wealthier, that are having more opportunity, that are able to move here to afford these prices. But is it us? Is it Oaklanders? Is it people who've been here, who've been living through the pandemic? It's not. So there's going to be more displacement. There's going to be more people who cannot afford to stay here, who cannot afford a house, who can't even afford to rent here. And that is by design. And things are getting more expensive while people are unemployed, while people have been under an eviction moratorium and not able to pay their rent. Once those things are lifted or ended, hopefully not ever, but likely they will be. And once they are, there's going to be a further cliff that people will fall off of into a deeper gap of inequity. So I think that the way it's looking, we're going to need to, again, center equity in how we build back our city, how we recover from the pandemic, not just to blanketly give out all business loans, but understand that there's businesses that never received federal assistance or state assistance, that are chambers of commerce or minority community, minority-owned businesses raising their own funds to support people during this pandemic. So there's already an inequity of who's hurt the most, who's lost the most, who's been cut off from the most resources and opportunities during this pandemic. And if we're not leading with that in mind, then it's going to get worse, or it's going to be maintained, the larger inequity will come out. That's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm believing. That's what our data is telling us around the actual value of living in this city. We are a wealthy city. We're wealthy in culture and history and arts, but also we are wealthy in property value. And people are going to keep trying to drive that up while driving certain folks and communities out, right? And it's largely going to be people who look like me. And so I want to stop those things from happening. And again, we're still trying to repair and return and have some type of healing from harm that's been caused during the pandemic, but even before, right? Equity Indicators report was 2018, 2 years before pandemic. So there were already crises going on, already communities in crisis, having housing crises and health crises before this pandemic hit everybody else. And those folks have been harmed even more and still don't have basic access to the same resources as other people.
Lisa, what's your website? Tell them your website for your campaign.
Our website is victoryforoakland.com. We would love contributions of any amounts, but we also really would love volunteers. That people power is what is going to win the election, not simply dollars or endorsements or name recognition, but it is talking to the residents. And
for Oakland.
Victory for FOR.
Oakland, okay.
Oakland.com. I'm also on all social media platforms, Victory for Oakland or Allyssa Victory. Please friend me. I'll follow y'all back. And I also am very accessible on those platforms. That's how Zenny reached me. So I do respond if y'all reach out through those channels as well.
It works, folks. Hey, does anyone tell you look like London Breed?
A few people have. A few people have.
I'll let you get out of here with that.
It's a compliment. She's a gorgeous woman, and she is our mayor in San Francisco. So hopefully we'll have women mayors, Black women mayors on both sides of the water by next year.
Well, have you met her? Do you know her?
Yes, I definitely know London Breed. We're both alumna of Emerge California, a women's candidate training program statewide. And again, I went to law school in San Francisco and frequently attend a lot of events. I've even advised the city and county of San Francisco, as well as Oakland, on public banking. So definitely familiar with elected officials in the entire region. And I just had people bring up London Breed to me a lot as, I guess we look similar to each other. Maybe it's because I went with red lips today and she always has like power lips on. So definitely an inspiration of, Black women leading, large metropolis cities.
You also mentioned public banking, and what are your thoughts on that? I'll explain why I asked, because I have an entirely different perspective. I work for ACLU.
Okay.
As his economic advisor, and we were first brought. It was first brought to us the idea of public banking that led to the Community Bank of the Bay, and what I've noticed is that the revival of the idea of public banking seemed to almost forget. Well, it seemed to forget what we did, because what we learned was that when you put the city in the position of being the bank, there's also a liability the city has to take on from an insurance perspective that, by and large, it can't afford. And so I'm wondering if we are not going about this the right way, or my thought, and I want to hear your thought. My thought is we have a kind of a bank already. We had it when we were giving out loans for economic development and microloans, but we spent too much time trying to, as I told Ignacio de la Fuente this when he was on the committee with me, and I got after Ignacio I said, hey, Ignacio's getting mad at me, but I don't care because I want to fight about it. He always kind of strong armed the people that we gave loans to, who we know couldn't pay them back easily, right? So I would say, wait a minute, just make it easier for them. That was our public bank. This goes all the way back to the 80s, 90s, excuse me. Where are we now that I ran my mouth about it? From your perspective, is that public bank possible, or what do you know that I don't know?
So I first got involved in public banking when I was a law student. I was actually taking a course in law school on public policy and was asked by the city and county of San Francisco and the city of Oakland to provide legal advice and memos that outlined how they could create their own municipal bank that was city-owned, city-controlled, and spent a whole semester working with both SF and Oakland to develop our research with my partner, Robert Graham, at the time. And I have published articles in the Hastings magazine around some of our research and provided extensive analysis to both cities about how they could create their own municipal bank. And the whole concept why they wanted to create this was to fund affordable housing development instead of waiting for corporations and private owners to just want to fund a public need that we have, and to help provide loans and financial assistance to small businesses. So it wasn't envisioned to be kind of individual bank account situation, though, as you said, things similar to that have actually existed before in Oakland. And our advice was that Oakland could do it faster than San Francisco because they are a city and a county and have little extra layers of bureaucracy and processes they'd have to go through. I believe they're actually further ahead in having already some resolutions drafted up to create their bank. And just last year, AB 1177 passed in our legislature and was signed into law that created the state fund. So there's been kind of, since I graduated law school, there seemed to have been a whole movement now of community members organizing, educating, presenting on what public banking is, why we need it, seeing it as an alternative to, again, corporate investors and developers, and cities being able to control development and to fund it themselves as a way to control the housing crisis and to respond to it. And so that call and that need has only gotten stronger ever since I was in law school. And I'm glad to see that it's gained more traction, that there's a movement behind it, not just people at the top levels of attorneys and of electeds talking about it, but that it was a movement and that it was on a public, in our legislative cycle and publicly discussed. And so more people are now understanding what it is. They're understanding how it can help us, how it's part of the solution to housing. So there's a lot more opportunity for us to get it done faster in Oakland. And we have Public Bank East Bay, which I've definitely been in conversation with already. I was on a housing panel with them a few months ago. That is already setting up to make sure that now they have legislation that's passed that cities or counties will implement it. And they are already drawing up, model documents and template legislation so that it's easier. So it's about the political will to do something that fundamentally will be public owned, public controlled, and be part of our public services, instead of partnering and depending on philanthropy and private dollars all the time to fund our basic services like housing. So I support public banking. It's definitely one of the cornerstones of my economic platform of helping to create and establish that. As you said, we've had some examples of that in our city before, and we've kind of gone backwards. And we have to, again, be students of the past and of history, learn from people that have come before us that already did try to initiate things that would help us.
And that'll be the last word. Oh, gotta have you back and talk some more.
Yes.
That's
We're done already?
Well, were it not for the fact that I have to eat, I can go on for another 3 hours.
Oh, you're ahead of me on time. I forgot
Right.
that too.
Yeah, I got my mom.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the time you've given me. I'm also just happy to learn a bit more about you and the work that you've been doing to bring news out in Oakland around current events. Definitely love to come back to talk more. Just let me know anytime, and I'll continue to follow your podcast and the news that you're putting out.
Stick around in the background, folks. Okay. Thanks a lot. We'll be back with more. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com because Allyssa, I got an aggregator now. It feeds over 1,500 posts of news daily from different YouTube channels, everything from all the K's in the Bay Area to LA to UK to, my gosh, we've got 4 or 5 Spanish language news channels. There, you name it, it's pretty much almost there. I'm really proud of it. Check it out, folks. And keep in mind, someone will say, well, it's not all Oakland. Well, yeah, I know, but you know what? A lot of people in Oakland don't read about just Oakland stuff. So there you go. All right. I'm proud of what I built. Check it out. And that's enough about me. You got to come back to the show. Love having you on. Love to talk to you. Stick around in the background. All right, folks. I'm out of here.
Happy holidays. Victory for Oakland.
Happy holidays. Happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you.